Hi, Anne, it's Kathy. This is my third time just to make this video for you. The first two were 20 minutes long, and I don't want to do that to you, but I'm going to try and be as clear as I can. There's just so much confusion here. I was trying to point it all out, and I don't want to drag this out. Okay, I got your email, and you said that you are creating rubrics for assignments. That will remedy standard 3.3 about how you're going to evaluate learners' work. So that's wonderful. Just know you don't have to create a rubric for every single assignment. Of course you could, but sometimes it's fine to just say that each question is worth 2 points or something like that. So keep that in mind, that a rubric isn't always necessary, especially if it's, just answering questions, or if it's a discussion board, it could be or an essay, it could be a word count. So anyway, that's good. So you're getting 3.3 done. And then you also mentioned you're putting URLs in your YouTube videos. That's great, and that's good, important work, but that's not necessary right now. That's not an essential standard, and really for the review, let's just focus on the essential standards, and then some of that other stuff that could be worked on, you can do it later. So the 2.4 and the 3.1, those two standards are also essential. We need to look at those. And those have to do with the relationship between the learning objectives and the learning activities. Can we clearly see that? And then 3.1 says, do the assessments measure the learning objectives? So let's look at 2.4 first. And it's really saying, is it clear? And I'm sorry to say right now, the work you've done is still very much not clear. So you put in a course map for Module 2. And you don't want to break up your course map into little module maps, because the course map should be a course map. And it's still called a course map here. And as you can see, your Module 2 is 6 pages long. And that's kind of typical for an entire course, not for one module. So your course map is incredibly, incredibly long. And it is because you have so many what you call content objectives. Okay, so let's begin by saying there has to be consistency for clarity. And right here, you're calling your course goals. But when we get into the class, when we get into the assignment pages, let's say, you don't always call them course goals. So for example, in this blog, you call them course competencies. So a course competency, competency, of course, is different than a goal. Competency means the students have to prove they can do something before they can move on. And so I don't think that's what's going on in this class. I think that these should all be called goals. So that would be the first thing, is to create consistency in your terminology and have everything say goals. That's what I think you want to say. And then this educational department student learning outcomes, this should probably just be taken off the map, because this is not something that has to do with Quality Matters alignment. This is something that you have in mind when you're working, but this was very confusing to the reviewers on how this fits in. Where does this fit in? And so I would suggest just taking this off your course map, because the course map with Quality Matters is to see alignment between course objectives or goals, the content or module objectives, the learning materials, and the assignments and activities. So I would suggest taking this off. The other thing is, you're saying content objectives. Okay, I think it would be more clear if you said module objectives, because this is all for Module 2. All of these objectives are for Module 2. So to say module objectives, to me, is clear. But you're using content objectives. In the class, you mostly say content objectives in your different assignment pages, but in all of these chapter section pages, you say chapter objectives. So now that's inconsistent again because there's no chapter objectives. So we have modules, but we don't have module objectives. And then we have content objectives. And then on some pages we have chapter objectives. So this was the big hang up for the reviewers with standard 2.4, saying the relationship between the learning objectives and learning activities is clear. That was part of the problem. The second part of the problem was the vast amount of objectives. So for this module 2, I think there's 30-something, 32 or something objectives. 32. And this is why it's 6 pages long, right? There's an incredible amount of objectives. And I know that some instructors will take every single objective from the textbook. So this is, module 2 has chapter 1 and 2, I believe. And I know that some instructors will take all the objectives from chapter 1 and all the objectives from chapter 2, and they will put that in their map, even if they don't have an assignment or an activity to align with it. And so I don't know if that's the case here or not, because we had a very difficult time finding all of these objectives show up in an assignment or an assessment. So let me give you a for example. For example, on this pre-blog chapter 1, you have the content objective is recall the ideas about human development. And if I look over here in the map, I see it here, but the assignment is up here in another box. So there's no numbering system to connect this to this. And so to look at it on the map, you can't see the connection because it's not even on the same line. So we were looking to see if the objective you have listed here, is it on the same line so we can just look horizontally across and see alignment? Or is there a numbering system where we could put the numbers together and say, okay, this goes with this? Because like this right here, describe how the lifespan, blah, 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 that would not go with this quiz because this quiz is multiple choice and you're saying to describe. So that's a disconnect. That's not aligned. But I don't know where this is. So then I start going through your module looking for where is it, and in these study questions I see how it's here, but this is only for extra credit. So you wouldn't have mandatory objectives for extra credit because the extra credit is optional. And so if it's optional but it's an objective for the course, it may or may not be met by every student. So if it's only for extra credit, it shouldn't be here as a module or content objective because the student doesn't even have to do it. Do you see what I'm saying? And then, like here, this is all in one box. This is all one box right here. So it looks like this quiz, this formative assessment quiz, your quizzes are all multiple choice. And so that would be like identify or something. And maybe differentiate, but explain, describe, and explain, that sounds like an essay assignment. So does this essay types of change, does it do all of these things? Does it talk about nature, nurture, continuity, discontinuity, and the influence of context in human development? Is all of that in this essay? So the course map, it does nothing to provide information about the relationship between the learning objective and the learning activity, and it does nothing to help standard 3.1 to where I can see these verbs. Does the verb work with the assignment? Because some of these quizzes have a whole bunch of verbs in them that have nothing to do. And see, like those quizzes, those quizzes aren't even in your module to see which content objectives align with them. So these quizzes, quiz 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 4, they're not even in this module for us to check that. There's an end of chapter quiz, and so the end of chapter quiz has all of these chapter objectives, which again, that should be content objective, right? But this is just for chapter 2. It has all of this, but how can a multiple choice quiz allow a student to assess or to contrast or to summarize? So these don't even make sense. So this is the problem with Standard 3.1. This does not look in alignment. Okay. Hopefully that gives you some perspective on what the reviewers went through and how what you've done so far is still not remedying Standard 2.4 or Standard 3.1. Please consider what I've said in this video. Let me know what I can do to explain further or provide more clarity. We can talk by phone in real time if that's helpful. But hopefully this helped you understand what we were seeing. I just want to mention one other thing that was very confusing, and that was all of these pages, these basic concepts and methods. And again, you know, competencies are used, and you're lumping together things, but I think it's for these 2 assignments. But again, it's just so much information. I don't know, Anne. It's just so hard. It's just so hard to figure all this out and filter through it all. I'm thinking that these concepts and methods pages are just not necessary. I think that you're doing so much work to be clear that it's actually making things extremely unclear, confusing, just hard to filter through everything. So, okay, see what you think about all that, and we can talk again. Thank you, Anne.